morning, everyone. I'm Bob Rohrlack, President and CEO of the Tampa Bay Chamber. Thank you for joining us today for another in our series of webinars where we are sharing information with you, the members in our region, on what's going on related to the COVID-19 pandemic and how it's impacting the community. Today, we have a very unique group here to talk to us about how chambers are dealing with the coronavirus situation from three of our partner chambers in Europe. The Tampa Bay Chamber is the only chamber in the United States that's part of the Chamber Roundtable made up of chambers in Europe. Today, we have three speakers who will be talking to us about what they're doing and how they're seeing this issue. Thank you for being here. We hope everyone is being safe as we start to look at ways we can come back to doing business. We know that there are a lot of issues going on. We're hearing a lot of different reports on how businesses are responding and governments are responding around the world. So today we want to share some insight with three chamber executives on how their chambers are working through this situation. Also, we put these events on in partnership with our Memorandum of Understanding Chambers of Commerce. They are the Greater Brandon Chamber, the Greater Plant City Chamber, the Greater Riverview Chamber, the Indo-US Chamber, the North Tampa Bay Chamber, the South Tampa Chamber, the Tampa Bay LGBT Chamber, the Tampa Downtown Partnership, the Uptown Chamber, the West Shore Alliance, and the Ybor Chamber. And thank you to our partner organizations for being working with us and part of these webinars that we've been doing every week. Now I'd like to introduce our three panelists that we have joining us today. First, we have Peter Byrne with the South Dublin Chamber of Commerce. Peter is the CEO of the South Dublin Chamber in Ireland. He has 3 master's degrees, a primary degree, and 4 diplomas. He gives seminars worldwide on organizational behavior, which over 2,000 senior executives in chambers have taken part in. He has discussed these operations and giving counsel to chambers in places as diverse as Azerbaijan and Australia. Peter serves as a NED on boards, including a hospital and a university. He is a qualified mediator and has negotiated in conflicts in Northern Ireland and South Africa. Peter, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Next, we have Elisabet Camprubi Holmes with the Barcelona Chamber of Commerce. Beth Camprubi is product manager and general director of BECE.cat and BEConline.com, and she's experienced in international business. She currently is the president of the Barcelona Chamber of Commerce and leading a project called CAT 3040. Thank you for being here, Elisabet. And our next speaker is Jonathan Walker, Assistant Director of the Northeast England Chamber of Commerce. The Northeast England Chamber of Commerce is the champion of business in the region, working on behalf of its 3,000 members to enable them to succeed nationally and internationally. As Assistant Director, Jonathan is responsible for managing and directing the Chamber's campaigning activity on behalf of its members on issues as diverse as transportation, something we deal with here, education, and regulation. He has held a number of roles with the Chamber since joining in 2009, following a spell in the recruitment sector. Jonathan holds a BA in politics and an MA in media and public relations from Newcastle University and is a member of the Chartered Institute for Public Relations. Thank you all for being here. It's an honor to have you here, and I look forward to having a great discussion on the hard work you all are doing for your members. What I'd like to do is start, if I can ask each of you to give an overview of your region and your organization, kind of what the leading industries are, just so our members can get an idea of your organizations and what we're working with. And Peter, why don't we start with you?
Sure. For those of you that know Ireland, I'm in the capital city, which is Dublin. And the area that my chamber covers is the area around the city. So there's a chamber in the city, and we're the chamber in the surrounding area around the city. So we've 700 members, and then we have a further associate membership of 1,600 companies. So the areas that we cover are primarily made up of business parks. So we have a lot of manufacturing, a lot of logistics, a lot of pharma companies, data centers. So the heavy lifting and the big workforce, that's who are the people that we primarily represent. Our sister chamber in the city, we would be very strong on financial, commercial, accountancy, and all of the professional services. We tend to be the manufacturer, distribution, logistics, and those heavy workforces that I described. The area is quite small in comparison to the United States, but by an Irish size, we're quite a big chamber. And our major focus at the moment, which is why I'm online and looking forward to talking to everyone, is how do we keep our business going in the current pandemic?
Very good. Jonathan?
Yes, that's good. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, similar to Peter, actually. The region we represent, compared to the UK economy as a whole, is more strongly centred around manufacturing, again, logistics, distribution. As was mentioned, we have around about 3,000 members, and they vary in shape and size, from some very big multinational companies, so Nissan Motor Manufacturing, their European, main European plant is based here, right down to sole traders, self-employed business consultants and the like. It's a region that, compared to UK averages, is a little bit poorer. Incomes tend to be a little bit lower. We have a higher concentration of lower skilled work because of the nature of those types of jobs, and probably slightly less strong in things like financial services than you might find in London. Also among English regions, quite geographically remote, certainly from London.
Great. And Beth?
Good afternoon from Barcelona right now. Well, yeah, following as the both of them, basically Barcelona Chamber of Commerce consists of, we have around 45,000 members. We are locally based in Barcelona province, although Catalonia region consists of 13 chambers of commerce. Barcelona province, yeah, we are basically in charge of 45,000 members, basically starting from self-employed, small, medium enterprises, and big companies as well. I need to say that we provide several services based in 3 different aspects: public functions, business promotions, and general interest. General interest based on, our sectors. We do have a range of sectors. Actually, any sector leads basically through the Chamber of Commerce of Barcelona right now. And then since May 2019, we became elected, and since then we are promoting our project. It's called Catalonia 3040, which consists of 15 axes. International is the main axis that we are basically working on. And just to go a little bit deeply in this, project 3040, we have, as international department, we have already allocated a list of 33 countries that's through a survey that we have developed. And these 33 countries are basically listed to be visited in the next coming 3.5 years. But COVID has changed our plans a little bit. But the idea was basically to sign up a new MO, Memorandum of Understanding, with a new, different way of working. Our board member consists of basically 12 members. All of us are businessmen. Therefore, our way of managing the Chamber of Commerce of Barcelona is slightly different from the past. We are not, a governmental institution. We are kind of semi-private. So it means that we need to, like the both of them, look for ways to sustain our company, so as to speak. And then right now we are employing over 113 employees, which is quite a long number. And then since COVID arrived, things have changed, and I've already prepared a few things, but I will just share, them with you later whenever you tell me when. Thank you.
Perfect. Good. Well, let's jump right into that. Every country has had some version of a shelter-in-place policy that has been mandated by government. Talk to us about where your region or your country is now on what is being mandated to the citizens for shelter-in-place. And Beth, can you go first on that?
Yeah, definitely. My pleasure. Well, everything started in my area back in March 15th. We were called to stay in. So the lockdown call was literally stated from March the 13th. And then I have just briefly stated on this little document in 4 different goals, right? These 4 goals consist of the things that we have done and the things that we want to do in the next coming weeks. The first goal or the first need that we had to cover was basically to help our members. Helping them means basically to provide them with an online service. That online service was or is basically to provide them with advice how to deal with that unsporadic situation. What am I supposed to do now? Still on, and this is carried on by volunteers that are helping the Chamber of Commerce of Barcelona. These are members that used to be members. They are kind of retired, but they are still active. So they are basically helping us 24/7. You could be surprised how many phone calls we've been kind of allocating in 1 week, maybe around 500 phone calls. And we have assisted all of them. Because, in terms of needs or in times of need, it's when you are literally in need of. So I need to talk to somebody, give you some advice. What am I supposed to do from there on? Then the second goal was to think of an economic measure proposal that I have already shared with the round table, as you well know. This economic measure proposal has been compared to the European, Union other proposals that's been laying there, and we've been improving it accordingly. That was the plan. And then we are still working on that because there's been a stage 2 of this economic measure that some of the furlough, measures have been literally pushed to the end of June because the COVID is still there. We are not dealing with the situation on the health side, not as well as, other countries in the northern of Europe, because we are still short of tests. We are, still in need on how to control those who've been infected or who, is still there to be infected. And it is not easy to handle because not still you can, mathematically speaking, have control of that. You just don't know the outcome of it. So we are dealing with it on a daily basis. So anyway, the economic measure has been pushed to be until the end of March. The third goal has been stating this calendar. That calendar consists of, from the very beginning, from March the 15th to mid-April, that only the basics companies that are in charge of providing us with basics. So these have been up and running. So the people, could carry on with their own life. But then from April the 14th, once after we flattened the curve, basically these basic companies were able to continue providing and working, and then other companies were allowed to go to work to from their offices. That brought us, or that was a way for us to realize that, okay, there would be a change of figures in terms of COVID, because we had to wait for 14 more days. 2 weeks after that, we realized that the number of infections, grew up a little bit, so that we had to be careful so as to see if the third goal, which was to extend our calendar, was the last one, so as to say that it was reliable, that we just, could start having normal life. This is called the deconfinement. So we are trying to loosen this lockdown call. We are still there, and this calendar consists of 4 stages. Stage number 1 is where we are right now. So we are still working from home. Schools are closed. Only, specific companies, specific sectors are, able to work from the company, but it's a slight number. That's the phase 0. That means that only small business can appoint individual, meetings, but honestly, you would walk out and rather would say the streets are empty, although the economy is still there, it's working, it's up there, it's active, because as you well know, we need to try to find ways to keep it up, working basically. Phase number 1, only in some parts of Catalonia, in this case, the northern parts, up in the mountains, they are able just to start, activating the phase 1. Phase 1 means that, social mini gathering of 10 people top are able to meet. Some bars, some restaurants, open air markets, but always, protecting us from each other by wearing, facial shields and the PPEs and so on, right? Phase 2 is still there, up waiting for new, maybe new data, so to see if we are able to, to go ahead with our life. And this is where the uncertainty is. Uncertainty as 4 points: schools, family life and working life balance. If people are allowed to go to work and schools are closed, what happens with babies, children? Education system is there. We are obviously providing online, teaching or education, but what happens with those kids who are age 3, 4, 5, 6? I need to remind you that in Catalonia or in Spain, education system starts at the age of 3, not at the age of 6. It's compulsory. So that means that all kids from age 3 to 6, they are just literally they just kind of stand at front of the computer just to wait for the teacher, to give them the session. That doesn't work like that. But that's the second uncertainty. The third is basically, if the economic measures have been pushed to the end of June, what if we can go to work from end of June? What's going to happen? How are we supposed to provide our families, our companies with, economic measures so as to carry on? And unemployment rates right now 16%. And because of the furlough, that's going to be more than 20%. Economic turndown is expected, GDP to be lower to 8% this 2020. This is very negative news, as you know.
Right, wow.
And one more thing is that based on our studies, is that there is a good chance that our small, medium enterprises and freelance might shut down, and that's around 47%. And this is not good at all. So from the Chamber of Commerce of Barcelona, our next goal is basically our goal that started 3 weeks ago was we can't let any company shut. So we need to find any way, any measure to sustain them in one way or other, right? And then things that we have activated, and I think that's of your interest, is that last week we activated a virtual trade exhibition that consists of literally of 2 days online, where we created 18 different workshops based on 8 different sectors. And then we gathered 7,000 people, and that was very successful. And that was just the beginning, that was just the kickoff. And from that kickoff, now we are arranging weekly workshops, so as to speak, where people, instead of physically going there and promote and talk about the uncertainty and what to do next, now it's basically, being online. And more than happy to share this information with you as soon as things get uploaded online. I will send it over, because I think it's a good idea for you to learn from us. That's a way that we're trying to activate our economy, right? What else? Something else? We came up with an e-commerce platform. Sorry.
No, that's great information. Let's see how Ireland and England are doing that. So we got a lot more questions.
I have 3 more things to say. If we have time left, happy to share them with you. Sorry about that.
No, not a problem. Peter, how is the shelter in place working in Ireland?
It's working extremely well. Like everybody else, we've gone through the 3 stages: denial, shock, and now we're coping. So, in fairness to the government, and part of my job as a chamber CEO is to represent business and to challenge the government. But I think they've done a very good job. So, compliments to them. So the main recovery elements are to ensure that people remain employed. So what the government have said is that if you keep a person on your payroll and your business is affected, you will get a subsidy of $438 per person per week for the foreseeable future. And that's been going on since we had our close down on the 12th of March, and we're expecting it will go on for a few weeks longer. And they've said for anybody who lost their job, so maybe an employer isn't able to keep somebody on, so they said if you've lost your job but you believe you will be going back into the workforce, then all the normal criteria relating to unemployment assistance has been waived, and you've immediately got $378 per week paid into your bank account by the government while this COVID response is going on. So they're immediate measures, and they're very important measures that it makes it possible for companies to keep employees, and it makes it possible for people who've been made suddenly unemployed to at least have some income. So some of the other measures is the banks have come in and they've said that we are suspending mortgage payments where we're requested for 3 months. So quite a number of people with mortgages who, which would be normally one of your biggest payments, either as an individual or as a business, you've been able to get that mortgage payment frozen for 3 months. Now it will be added on to your long-term mortgage payment, but at least you've got that breathing space for 3 months. And that's helped in turn with rent payments. So some of the bigger bills, salaries and rent and mortgages being addressed immediately. Then they made a small grant of $5,500 available to any company that wanted to see how they could move some of their business online. And they made a smaller grant of $2,300 available to people that wanted to set up their business at home. So a lot of different initiatives, and there's lots of them for all different types of business. And then right up until interest-free loans of up to $500,000 for the bigger companies to help them invest in different processes and take them through it. So just so people know what the landscape looks like, children aren't in school; they won't be going back till September. Unless you're seen as an essential worker, you can't be in your office. So essential workers will be people in the retail, so people that sell food and groceries, people that are in hospitals, people that are in the military or police or the logistics or data centers. There's quite a lot of companies actually that come under the heading of essential services. They're all still open. And all of my members fall into one of 3 categories. They're either somebody that's really busy and they're trying to find how can I get more people to work in the logistics or the manufacturing because it's boom time, which may sound strange, but there are a number of companies that are doing extremely well because they have to produce materials such as face masks, visors. Then there's another group of companies who are thinking, oh my goodness, all our staff are suddenly working from home and we've never had to do this before, so how do we cope? And then there's the third group, which unfortunately it's very bleak for them, that they closed down and they're not opening for the foreseeable future. So that foreseeable future is going to be a 5-stage process. So starting next week, which is the first starting of the unlocking, we're starting to see that construction can, with all this health and safety measures put in place, they can start back. But the last group to open will be the cafes and the hotels, and they won't be opening until August. Now, if you do takeaway food, and there's some restaurants that will between now and August be allowed, but the bulk of hotels and the hospitality sector will not be opening until August. So we're the same as most people. We're practicing the safe distance. People are wearing masks, not all the places, but certainly where there's a lot of people gathered, like in supermarkets, you'll see people with masks and gloves. And we're just trying to get ready. So part of the reopening, which we were learning because it was only announced last night, is that every business has to have a COVID champion, which may sound a strange term, but that's a person in the workplace who's there to ensure that the company is kept honest and has a very safe working environment for people returning to work.
That's an interesting idea. Okay, Jonathan, tell us how what the current shelter-in-place directive is in your area.
Yes, so we actually as a chamber, our staff were sent home and told to work from home sort of 1 week before the official lockdown started, which means I slightly lose count, but I think we are now in our 9th week of lockdown, where there have been very few changes to the restrictions. Similar place to Peter actually in terms of where we are. We're just starting to see some of the immediate exit from that. So again, construction being one of the first sectors, because obviously the majority of it is outside and distance can be maintained. In some respects, the official line from government has been that their lockdown and their advice has been too effective, and more people have been working from home than they anticipated. So a lot of manufacturing businesses actually sent their staff home when they probably could have worked with some element of social distancing. And there is a message now that if you can go back to work and you can work safely to do so, with the caveat that if your job can be done from home, it absolutely should be. And we're working on the assumption that there won't be large-scale office reopenings until realistically September, possibly later in the year. Similarly, social restrictions, as Peter said, there is a phased reopening of schools likely to begin from next month, starting with some very young age groups, but it will take some time and we won't be back until September. Again, the support offered by the UK government, similar to how Peter described, one of the the big and most eye-catching schemes, I think it's probably the biggest scheme of its type in Europe, actually, is the Furloughing Scheme, or the Job Retention Scheme, as it's been called by the government, which very simply allows businesses to place their staff on a leave of absence, and the government will pay 80% of their salary for that period. There has been huge take-up of that. We're actually doing some survey work of our members at the moment, and significant proportion, possibly the majority of businesses we talk to, have taken that up in some way. We ourselves as a chamber have placed a number of our staff on furlough because we're not running physical events at the moment, so there's no requirement for some of those staff. But essentially, it has stopped major redundancy programs. Our fear, and certainly my work in the lobbying that we do, is to ensure that scheme is unwound gently, because otherwise we will end up in a situation where those redundancies have been delayed rather than avoided.
Good. Very interesting. So in the case of England started off with more of the herd immunity strategy, and then reversed that. And of course, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson became ill, and all this. So how has business reacted to the first strategy and then a switch to a second strategy?
I'll with avoiding politics too much, but I think the advice from government, or the messages from government, certainly in public statements from Prime Minister and other government officials, has been confusing for businesses, which has resulted in a lot of work for particularly my team at the Chamber. We've taken a lot of questions from businesses every time there's a new announcement by the government. Businesses asking, does this affect me? Am I an essential company? Am I staff key workers? And there's been confusing language. It is getting better, and we've worked very closely with our national body, the British Chambers of Commerce, to try to get some of that feedback back from businesses. But I think, generally speaking, businesses accept and understand the situation that we are in. They obviously want the health of their employees to come first. I think we are now getting to a stage where there will be some inconsistencies in policy that will cause problems. So on one hand, we have government telling people to try and get back to work. And I speak with a personal interest here. I can do that because I have a 3-year-old at home with nowhere for her to go. And I think we'll start to see some of those inconsistencies causing real headaches for businesses as they try to navigate a way out of this.
And Peter, your Prime Minister in Ireland was kind of on a waning track, but then his leadership through this process, I saw an article that said his popularity has taken a big upswing. People like the way he's been leading on this. Is that right?
Yes, it is. And what's really stood him in very good stead is he's a qualified doctor. So the fact that he's a doctor, he gets it. And I think sometimes because he's got that sort of medical training, sometimes he may not come across as the touchy-feely type that I suppose we look for in political leaders. But he made a very good decision from day one, in that he handed over to the Chief Medical Officer to do a nightly briefing. So we get our information each evening, not from anyone in the political or the government. The government make the decisions, and they come out once or twice a week and tell us what those decisions are. But in terms of raw data about how many people are infected, what the infection rate is, what it is we should be doing, we're getting that from the Chief Medical Officer. So I think people trust that they're getting real medical information from the Chief Medical Officer. And then our Taoiseach Prime Minister, he's been very good, because he's come out and he said, look, we get it. Nobody's happy with this situation. I'm going to be as transparent and as honest as possible, but you're going to have to take it that I really don't know, because there's too many variables. And the more information we get, the better it will be. So I think they've been able to manage expectations, which is the hardest thing in this, because we all want to know, when can we go back to work? When will there be a vaccine? When is this over? With the cautiousness that we all need to follow in order to protect our health and those of our loved ones.
So, and Beth, in Spain or in Barcelona, are people happy, or are they comfortable with the leadership from government, or how's that political side of dealing with this been? I think we're on mute.
Like Jonathan said, we try to be away from politics, but we have to be involved. because Catalonia region, we have our own, political system, and then we have the Spanish, economic political system, and then there's been a battle. One political system would say something different to the other one. So to a point that we as citizens, we are a little bit like, we don't know what to do. We have no idea. So we go day by day. Unfortunately, this is the situation. So from Chamber of Commerce, what we are trying to do is just to provide, our members with this little and, information that can help them to plan a little bit ahead. That would be the minimal probably that we are doing. We are doing lots of things, but seems little compared to the situation.
Yeah, and here, if there's an emergency, our 3 cities located in the county, along with county leadership, law enforcement, and our school board, form a government task force that they vote and decide steps to take together as one group, and they extend their life on 2-week increments to go through this, trying to have some consistency in decision making. And depending on the decision, it's been up, it's been down on the acceptance and agreement coming from the population. But people are eager to get back to work, which is a good sign. So I'll throw this up to anyone who's comfortable. From what we see in our media, obviously Italy has had an extremely tough time dealing with this virus and what's been going on. It's been identified as a hotspot in the world. How are your countries responding, being much closer to Italy than we are, to interacting on that issue? And whoever's comfortable answering that one.
I'm happy to kick off with that, Bob.
Sure.
I mean, our airports are practically closed, so it's the same for most European countries. I mean, the European Union have brought in some rules and regulations about, advisory about how people should be moving. So initially, I suppose Italy is a very international country. They have a lot of connectivity with China. So they took it really hard, and they know them to look to for exemplars of good practice. In Ireland, we were able to see what happened in Italy, then to a secondary wave, what happened in Spain. And through the European Union, we learned a lot from what Italy did and what Spain did. And we also saw examples of Denmark and Sweden. So there's very little travel, but what there is a lot of exchange of information and knowledge. And you referenced at the beginning that the 4 of us are part of the European Roundtable. I mean, that's a very good forum by which we can share practical examples of what's working and what isn't working. And I think the most intelligent governments are looking to learn from each other rather than believing that any of us have the solution.
That's good. Anybody else want to add on that?
Yes, I'll come out. Support Pete said, and obviously we now for time in the press, Italy was seen as the example you didn't want to follow, but actually we've seen in the UK the toll that coronavirus has taken has now matched Italy's. Without wanting to sort of fully parrot a government line, I think it is too early to do proper international comparisons. There are discrepancies in how data is being recorded and reported, but quite clearly this is affecting some countries far harder than others. And I think in the UK we to some extent suffered from what Peter was saying about the strength of international connections. So London was hit very hard because it is in that tier of being a very global city, much I guess as you would say New York and Tokyo and other places like that. So once it was in London, it was in London in a big way, and of course now we're seeing that spill out into the rest of the UK, which ultimately is a relatively small country, certainly compared to the US.
I would like to add basically something to the both
Sure.
of them. Catalonia, Spain is between Italy and Portugal. We are right in the southern of Europe. We admire the northern of Europe, but we also get information from Asia, right? So we are trying to literally make a cocktail of all this information and to see what would be the best for us. But culture is also some things that it takes, its toll in it, because in the northern countries, it's basically on their own, let's say, state of mind. Like it's up to you how you want to protect yourself from the situation. And as soon as in Spain, we've been given the green light to go out, everybody went out. So it is difficult to find what the balance is, right? But obviously learning from everybody, and that's important to listen to everybody. And as Jonathan said, it's too early to make an assessment, but well, time will tell us from now, day by day.
Right. And before we went live, we had a brief conversation. I saw on our national media one station holding up Sweden as the model. They're doing it right. We need to replicate Sweden. But then another channel at the same time saying that's dangerous, that's disastrous. We shouldn't be doing what Sweden's doing. We should be doing the exact opposite. Talk about Sweden's decisions and how they have given recommendations, but basically left it up to the individual to decide how to carry on in this pandemic. How are you all seeing that from your perspective? Jonathan, why don't you start us off on that one?
Yeah, we've had a lot of comments from businesses and people we deal with, exactly as you said, pointing to Sweden and saying, why can't we be like that? I think time will tell whether or not that's been the most effective method. I think, being honest, Sweden is actually a very different country, certainly than the UK. There's sort of one major urban centre, and then the rest is relatively rural and low population density. Whereas the UK, we've got more cities with larger, higher densities of population. I think as well there are cultural differences as well, without wanting to denigrate my fellow citizens or those of other European countries. I think there are cultural differences about the type of government, social responsibility, and so on. And I think, as we've seen in some other countries, when lockdowns have been lifted, as I think Beth said, as soon as lockdowns get lifted, people push their freedoms to the limits.
Right. Okay. Good. So let's turn the table a little bit. What are the things you're hearing about how the United States is handling the pandemic? And rules and processes that we have going on. Any perceptions from your view? Beth, you want to start us off on that?
Little I could say about it is that at first, when I start, listening or following to the American news, it was like, oh, we were there, 3 weeks ago. We thought, that's not going to happen here. That's far away from it. And then it took them, or it took you basically just 2 days to realize that, wow, we were in the middle of it, right? So I think the beginning was not much different from the way we looked at it, to be honest, along the process. I think that whether who is, in charge of the country, the way they would manage and the decisions they would, be able to make on this, I need to say that this is not an easy matter to solve in 1 word or in 2 days, right? So having said that, I think that everybody's doing its best. I think it's nobody's interest just to let people go sick, and nobody wants that. So having that in mind, there is nobody to blame for either. Right? It's not China right. or States or whatever. So that's my point of view.
Okay, Peter, how about you?
I just from looking on the other side of the Atlantic, you see, Italy is very real to us. Italy's on our doorstep. We all know Italian people, and we're very familiar with it. I think because the United States is that bit further away, I don't think people realize the seriousness of the situation until it hit home really hard. Whereas I think we realized it a little bit quicker. So it would be the very same as, if you're in Florida and you're looking further up the coast and you're seeing something happening in Washington, you're going to get it really quick, and we in Ireland won't. So what I mean by that is that it's understandable that there was a delay, but we could see the seriousness of it. And I suppose on a personal level, all my mother's side of the family went to the States in the 1950s, so a lot of American relatives. And when you see some of the tragedies, especially, I suppose New York hits home very hard, because I know very few Irish people haven't been to New York, and I personally been there lots of times. It's very upsetting when you see it, because these are all people we know and love. So, as was said earlier, it's our best hope that we leave the criticism and the analysis to a later date. And if we can share something and learn something from each other, then that's the way to go.
I following on from Peter, I think what really hit home in the UK actually is I think this has exposed greater differences almost in the sort of economic model between certainly the UK and the US. So just prior to this crisis starting, we actually elected what would be considered a very conservative government in this country. Yet that conservative government is now paying the wages of millions of workers, which I would imagine in the US would be fairly unthinkable from a sort of conservative administration. I think it also brings home the other difference being the scale and the diversity of the US. So I don't know roughly comparative size, but the UK has a population of 70 million people in a space that I know is smaller than Texas. So geographically, we've got very different challenges.
Right. Interesting. One of the programs that came out early on was called the PPP program, Payroll Protection Program, that businesses could apply for, receive funding. It would be either a 1% interest loan, but if they kept their payroll level for 8 weeks, it would become a forgivable grant. But there have been a lot of criteria changes since that program first rolled out. So now we're seeing a slight wave of businesses who are returning the money right up front, saying it's become a little confusing. They don't want to deal with that confusion in there. It's just trying to figure out which way to go with what's happening. And people have figured out, just like you were saying with your members, they're figuring out a way to some level keep operating, keep going as best they can. A lot of businesses are struggling, but are keeping it going. Here, when the president announced travel restrictions, the hospitality industry, from tourism to hotels to restaurants, got hit, totally blindsided, not seeing it coming. Was it a similar start to the process in your countries, that it just hit overnight quickly and then the rest of the industry caught it?
Yeah, it's definitely. Barcelona, as you well know, is headed back to tourism. We depend on tourism, basically, right? So now we are trying, to come up with ways to, maybe to enlighten people that they can go out and try to do something, outdoors. And measures are not there set yet. That's why these virtual, workshops I was telling you about is basically to put people together to see if they can come up with ideas that could help all of them, from hotels, bars, and restaurants. To what level, I don't know. I mean, there might be some bars open, as I told you, the north of Catalonia. They are in stage 1, and that means that people can go out and have a drink. That's the beginning of socializing, which is important because it's also part of our culture. So in terms of tourism, I mean, they call it the season. It's gone. It's wasted. So now we need to survive this dry season and start thinking how for 2021. But everything has been put off. Concerts. We live from concerts in summer in Barcelona, right? Everything has been cancelled. Everything. Nothing has been left there just to maybe. There is no maybe. Everything has been moved to 2021. And it's hard to mentally accept in terms of business-wise.
Yes,
go ahead, John.
That the cancellation of major events is very hard. So Britain was due to host a number of major sporting events, European football championships. They've all been pushed back, and it was overnight. And I think one of our concerns, and this I presume will be echoed right around the world, where hospitality has been hit really hard, and hotels and bars, that even as they open with some social distancing measures and regulations in place, they may only be able to produce 30% of their revenue that they normally would, but it will cost them a lot more than that to reopen. Right. And certainly conversations we're having with businesses is it worth them reopening if essentially government is restricting the amount of money they can make?
And Peter, I think I saw you nod when I asked if it was a sudden impact to hospitality. Was it the same?
Yeah, it was a shock. It really was a shock, because you could understand how other businesses would start to reopen, but the more you became aware of how the virus worked, the more you realized that tourism was going to be the hardest hit, the first to close and the last to open. I mean, we ourselves, one of the highlights of our year was going to be your visit from the Greater Tampa Chamber. We were really looking forward to seeing you guys. The hotel was looking forward to seeing you. There was lots of things lined up, and it all suddenly came tumbling down. And it's the loss of tourism is twofold. It's the revenue and the economics, but it's also the vibrancy of your life. I mean, we're a small country. It's great seeing people come in the summer. It's great for us to go to Florida and to enjoy your hospitality in the summer. So it's affected the way we see life and the way we live life, as well as the economics of life.
For those watching, the Chamber had planned their first truly going overseas international benchmarking trip for this year. Obviously, that's had to be postponed, has now been pushed into 2021, but we're looking forward to conducting that trip. Well, watching the clock, we don't have a whole lot of time left, I'd like to ask each of you, your countries have been a little bit ahead of this experience than what we are seeing here in the United States. If you could sit down with some of our businesses and give them some pointers on things they should be doing now to continue to work to get through this process, what advice would you give to a business in the States that desperately wants to get back to what things were like before? Elisabet, I'll start with you.
Things that we are coming up with, the first message is to work hand in hand, try to be together, put brains together, so as you can, make, better decisions because you can help each other. In terms of Europe, what we are trying to do right now is to develop a program, which means to go that country and Spain together for a B2 mission, whatever we want to go, as a way to keep up the internationalism, because otherwise, as Jonathan said, so is it worth to open my business tomorrow? Well, we need to give them the light that yes, for now, maybe it means just to make the break even. Maybe this is going to be like this for now, temporarily. For how long? We don't know. But there is no other option. We just can't basically close down and stay home, right? And obviously another message is that we will never go back where we were in February. That's a message. So realism, step on, what is the expression? Down to earth, way of thinking, because things have changed. And it means that our business needs to slightly be modified to maybe different programs, different markets. Just you need to redo your business basically because life has changed, and this is
sure. Okay, Jonathan, how about you?
Yeah, I think what Elisabet said is really good. I think we would again echo that sense of community. It is by businesses working together in this sort of spirit of cooperation and fairness that we'll get out of this. So, as an example, a conversation we're having with a lot of our larger businesses is how they can sort of fairly and rapidly pay their supply chain in order to keep that supply chain going at a time when there is some recovery, working hand in hand and sort of sharing some of the pain. As was said before as well, there'll be winners and losers from the situation, and there will be, as we saw. I joined our chamber just as the financial crisis was really hitting. So I've done 2 of these now, and we did see some businesses do very well out of that, and we as a chamber actually about 12 months ago invested very heavily in technology because we felt it was the right thing to do actually for business resilience. So we never expected it would be tested quite so quickly, but it has paid back, and actually we're now sharing that with some other UK chambers. So that's the other message I would say is sort of really to take the time to learn lessons from this, and the fact that your business model has been a certain way for 20 years doesn't mean it will be the same way for the next 20 years.
Very good. Peter, how about you? Wrap us up on that question.
Just to echo what's been said, that we do have a policy of can pay, do pay. And what we're saying to businesses that it's morally incumbent on you, if you can pay your bills, to do it. Because a cash flow crisis will be as bad as the coronavirus is to business. But what I would say to many companies, and we've seen this in Ireland, that a lot of companies are saying working from home, it's not the way we thought it would be. And I would point out to you that anyone working from home in a normal situation would have transferred from the office to home over a period of time and set up properly. They would have not have grabbed their laptop on a Friday and not come back to work for several weeks. So a little bit of patience as people adjust to working from home. Understand that if I was to suddenly bring my family into the workplace and everybody else was, the workplace would be very different. So we have to balance that out. I also think that businesses have to be aware that there is a nervousness. Whenever there's uncertainty, there's nervousness. So with employees returning to work, or even those working from home, the more transparent you can be with people and the stronger you can build a team by telling them which way you're thinking, listen to everybody in the company who has something to contribute that may help you resolve the problems. And for those coming into the workplace, simple things such as foot signages about keeping the distance, sanitizers available, just making people feel that you acknowledge that there is a risk, you're doing something about it, and that you are listening to them. Because it's been my experience and the experience of the companies that we work with, that if you share a problem with them in an honest way and say, look, here's the situation, here's the way we're thinking of going, we're the management, we're going to drive it, but we really are interested in what you have to contribute because you might have a different perspective. Then people get comfortable. They feel that, look, I have a fighting chance here to keep my job and to make this company work. So listen, be kind, and understand that anybody who's working from home in the last couple of weeks didn't plan it. They just got landed with it.
We are just a couple minutes away. I just want to take a minute and thank the three of you sincerely for your time, for your information, your willingness to do this, to talk to our membership here in the Tampa Bay region. I'm amazed how quickly the time went. I thought this was incredibly informative. I've taken notes. I'm impressed with how each of you are dealing with your members and dealing with your communities to get through this process. I think a strong takeaway is that we are truly all going through this together. And as much as processes have stopped and that the ability to connect in person has been halted for a while, we are definitely connected, and we all are getting to know each other very well through technology on our computers. But again, I thank you all sincerely. Our membership, thank you. We will be posting this on our website. I'll let you all know when it's up so you can encourage your members to see as well. But this has been incredibly fascinating. If we can return the favor in any way, please let me know how. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to our viewers. And I just ask everyone, stay safe, follow the directions, look at what your industry is recommending as well as what your government is recommending to do, and make sure you wash those hands. So thank you to our speakers very much. I appreciate you all being here. Have a wonderful evening. It's evening where you are at the end of the day, but thank you all so much for being here with us today. And with that, we'll say goodbye. Thank you, everyone.